Welcome to Sci-Fi Verse. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on new videos, and enjoy the listening. The outpost of Thorn clung to the edge of the world like a stubborn weed growing from cracked stone. In every direction the wilderness stretched vast and unforgiving, as if nature itself had decided that this far-flung place was better off forgotten. The people here were fighters, outcasts, and survivors. But Jack's mourn wasn't like the others. He wasn't running from something, he was chasing something no one else would dare approach. Thorn was a ragged collection of weather-beaten buildings huddled against one another, surrounded by thick walls reinforced with iron plates and barbed wire. Beyond those walls, the wildlands spread like a living sea, ancient forests, jagged mountains, and shadowed ravines where few humans dared tread. Thorn was a last bastion of civilization in a world teeming with creatures that could tear a man apart in seconds. Jax's decision to leave the relative safety of the outpost to seek out the Behemoth, the legendary apex predator of the wilds, had the townsfolk divided. Some said he was mad. Others said he was destined to become another tale told around the fire, a warning about hubris and foolhardiness. But Jax had always been different. He didn't just want to survive, he wanted to understand what lay beyond the walls, what truly ruled the wilderness. "Jax, I don't get you," said Darla, the quartermaster, as she handed him a worn rucksack. Her voice was laced with frustration and concern. "You're asking for death, plain and simple. No one goes into the ravine and comes back." "Maybe I'm not like no one," Jax replied, tightening the straps over his broad shoulders. His tone was calm, but there was a spark in his eyes, a hunger for something more than just survival. "That's what they all say." Right before they're chewed up and spit out, she slammed the supply chest shut and glared at him. "What makes you think you can do what 100 before you couldn't?" Jax gave her a crooked smile. "I'm not going out there to kill it, Darla. I'm going to make it understand me." She let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "You think it cares about understanding? The Behemoth's a force of nature, not some dumb beast you can tame. It's like trying to reason with a storm." Jax shrugged. "We'll see." Darla leaned in, her weathered face inches from his. "You're not a fool, Jax, but you're damn close. I'll keep your gear ready, but don't expect a warm welcome if you're crawling back in pieces." "Appreciate the vote of confidence," Jax said, tipping his hat before turning to leave. As he walked out of Thorn, the eyes of the settlers followed him, some filled with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with outright disdain. They whispered, muttering that he was a dead man walking. But Jax had always been different, drawn to the unknown rather than the safety of walls. He thrived where others crumbled. The wildlands opened before him like a living beast, shadows shifting between ancient trees, the wind carrying whispers that tugged at the edges of sanity. Each step took him deeper into the Behemoth's territory, a place where few dared venture and none returned. But Jax wasn't just looking to survive, he was here to do the impossible, to bond with the creature that ruled these lands. The ravine, a jagged scar in the earth, marked the boundary of the Behemoth's domain. Few who crossed into it ever returned. The trees grew twisted and ancient, their roots tangled in black soil that seemed to swallow the light. The air was thick with a scent that was part rot, part musk, an earthy reminder that this was a place of death. But to Jax, it was also a place of possibility, where old laws of nature reigned supreme, untainted by human hands. "All right, you old bastard," Jax muttered as he reached the edge of the ravine. The wind howled through the twisted trees, carrying faint, distant roars that sent shivers down his spine. "Let's see if you're as smart as they say." The first few days were quiet, unnervingly so. The usual sounds of the wild were absent, replaced by a heavy stillness. Jax set up camps with care, always vigilant, always watching. He knew something was out there, observing him just as he was searching for it. The Behemoth wasn't like any predator he'd faced before. It was more patient, more cunning, and more intelligent. Jax spent his days following faint trails, claw marks gouged deep into ancient oaks, furs snagged on jagged rocks, footprints as wide as a man's chest pressed into the earth. At night, he listened. The wind carried strange sounds, deep rumbles that seemed to come from beneath the ground, the snap of branches as something massive moved through the underbrush. He knew he was being watched, tracked. The Behemoth was testing him, seeing how far he would go, how much he would endure. On the fourth night, Jax decided to take a risk. He set a trap, not to catch the creature, but to draw it closer. He built a fire, letting the smoke rise thick and high. Fresh meat sizzled on the flames, the scent wafting through the air. Jax positioned himself behind a large boulder, spear ready, but his intention wasn't to fight. Hours passed, the night stretching into silence broken only by the crackling fire. Jax's muscles ached, his senses sharpened by the tension hanging in the air. He knew the behemoth was near, he could feel its presence like a pressure in his chest. Then, at last, the shadows shifted. A low rumble echoed through the trees, a sound so deep it felt like the earth itself was groaning. Jax's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain still. Fleeing would be pointless, he wasn't here to run. From the darkness emerged a colossal shape, only partially illuminated by the firelight. The behemoth was bigger than any creature he had ever seen. Its fur was matted in places, its scales jagged and scarred. Golden eyes, burning with an ancient intelligence, locked onto Jax's hiding place. It moved with a grace that belied its size, each step measured, deliberate. Jax slowly raised his empty hands, showing he wasn't a threat. "I'm not here to kill you," he said, voice steady. "I want to learn from you." The behemoth's gaze narrowed, studying him with a predator's scrutiny. It didn't attack, but it didn't retreat either. The ground trembled slightly as it took a step forward, a growl rumbling deep within its chest. Jax's instincts screamed at him to flee, but he held his ground. "I figured you wouldn't take kindly to strangers," Jax continued, his voice calm despite the fear gnawing at him. "But we're not strangers, are we? You've been watching me, making sure I'm not just another fool out here to stick a spear in your hide." The behemoth's claws dug into the earth, its tail lashing in slow, deliberate motions. It was listening. "You've been king out here longer than anyone. I get that. You don't want anyone challenging your rule, and I'm not here to do that. I'm looking for something different, something we can do together." The creature took another step forward, its form fully emerging into the firelight. Jax could see it now, thick plates of armor running down its spine, muscles rippling beneath the scars that told stories of countless battles won. But it wasn't just brute force, there was something else in its gaze, a calculating awareness. Jax kept his eyes locked on the creatures, never breaking contact. "You've survived out here because you think ahead, you adapt. I'm the same way. We're not so different." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the behemoth let out a low huff, almost as if considering his words. It turned away, stepping back into the shadows, but it didn't vanish entirely. It lingered just beyond the firelight, watching as Jax slowly sat back down and resumed stoking the flames. "You didn't kill me," Jax said aloud, more to himself than to the retreating shadow. "That's a start." The next morning, Jax found tracks around his camp, massive prints that circled where he'd slept. The behemoth had been closer than he'd realized, close enough to kill him if it had wanted to. But it hadn't. It was a sign that his gamble was working. Over the following days, Jax ventured deeper into the behemoth's territory, always careful to respect the invisible boundaries it seemed to set. He left offerings of meat at strategic points, built fires in the evenings, and kept talking partly to the shadows, partly to himself. He knew the behemoth was listening, watching his every move. "You've probably never had anyone try to speak to you like this," Jax mused one evening, his voice soft as he stared into the crackling flames. "Most people either come to hunt you or run from you. Maybe you're wondering why I'm not doing either." The night air was still, but Jax felt a presence just beyond the light. He glanced up and saw those familiar golden eyes watching him from the shadows. He smiled. "It's simple, really. I think we're not as different as you might think. You're at the top of the food chain because you've earned it. But you've done more than survive, you've ruled these lands with a purpose. I'm not here to challenge that. I'm here because I believe we can do something greater than either of us could alone." The behemoth edged closer, its massive form almost fully visible. It crouched low, its muscles rippling with controlled power, ready to strike if provoked. But Jax didn't flinch. He was starting to understand the creature's patterns, the subtle shifts in its posture, the way it communicated through movement rather than sound. It was still testing him, probing for weaknesses, but there was something else there too: curiosity. "I'm not your enemy," Jax said, his tone soft but firm, "and I'm not here to bow down either. I'm here because I think we can learn from each other. You survive because you adapt, you think. So do I." The creature let out a low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a hum. It was assessing him, weighing his words against instincts honed by years of dominance over this land. Finally, the behemoth took a step fully into the light, towering over Jax. Its breath was hot, washing over him in waves as it leaned closer, nostrils flaring as it caught his scent. Jax's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm, to keep his gaze steady. The behemoth's eyes bore into his, and for the first time, Jack saw more than just primal hunger. There was something deeper there, a flicker of recognition, as if the creature was beginning to understand his intentions. Slowly, carefully, Jax reached out a hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he made contact with the creature's rough, scarred hide. It was warm, alive, and thrumming with power. The behemoth didn't pull away, it held its ground, allowing the touch without recoiling. "I get it," Jax whispered. "You're giving me a chance." For a long moment, they remained like that man and beast, connected in a fragile understanding. Then, with a soft grunt, the behemoth stepped back into the shadows, its eyes lingering on Jax for just a moment longer before they too vanished into the darkness. Jax exhaled a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Well, that's progress. The days turned into weeks, and the fragile bond between Jax and the behemoth grew stronger. He followed it through valleys untouched by human hands, across jagged cliffs and through hidden groves where even the bravest predators dared not tread. He observed how it hunted, how it moved with precision, never wasting energy or making unnecessary noise. The behemoth wasn't just a brute, it was a strategist, using the terrain and its own strengths to its advantage. Jax adapted as well. He learned to move in sync with the creature, predicting its actions, mimicking its movements. The more he observed, the more he saw that the behemoth was more than just the apex predator, it was a ruler of its domain, maintaining a balance in the wilds that humans had long since abandoned. One evening, after a particularly grueling trek through a narrow ravine, Jax set up camp near a cliff's edge overlooking the dense forest below. The behemoth stood nearby, its golden eyes scanning the horizon as the last light of the sun dipped below the mountains. Jax could sense something different in the air in anticipation, as if the creature was waiting for something. "What is it?" Jax asked quietly. The behemoth didn't respond, but its posture remained alert, its gaze fixed on the darkening sky. Then, as the first stars began to twinkle above, Jax noticed movement in the distance, a shadow darting through the trees far below. He squinted, trying to make out what it was, but the darkness swallowed it too quickly. A low rumble from the behemoth told him all he needed to know: it was another predator, and it was coming closer. Jax's grip tightened on his spear. He had heard rumors of rival creatures, the Ravagers, vicious pack hunters that roamed the wildlands, killing indiscriminately. Unlike the behemoth, they had no sense of territory or balance. They were destroyers, driven by hunger and bloodlust. The behemoth's body tensed, muscles coiling as it prepared for what was coming. Jax felt his pulse quicken. He wasn't just a spectator anymore, he was part of this fight. The behemoth had accepted him into its world, and now it was time to prove that he belonged there. The first Ravager burst from the tree line below, a massive wolf-like creature with matted fur and eyes that gleamed like red coals. It was followed by 4 more, fanning out as they closed in on the cliff. They moved with terrifying coordination, their growls echoing through the night like a chorus of death. Jax took a deep breath, steadying himself. "You want me to fight with you, don't you?" he murmured, glancing at the behemoth. The creature's eyes met his, and for a brief moment he felt a connection, a shared understanding that went beyond words. The first Ravager lunged, a blur of muscle and teeth. The behemoth reacted instantly, swiping with a claw that sent the creature crashing into a tree with a bone-snapping impact. But the others didn't hesitate. They closed in from multiple angles, each one targeting a different weak spot. Jax knew he couldn't fight them head-on. He needed to outthink them. He watched the behemoth's movements, how it positioned itself, how it used its bulk to control the flow of the battle. It wasn't just raw power, there was strategy in every move. One of the Ravagers darted toward the behemoth's hind leg, trying to hamstring it. Jax saw the opening and struck, driving his spear into the creature's exposed side. The beast howled in pain, snapping at him with slavering jaws, but he rolled out of reach, leaving the spear embedded deep in its flesh. It staggered, blood pouring from the wound, before collapsing with a final, pitiful whimper. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining Ravagers pressed the attack, and the behemoth was struggling to fend them all off. Jax saw one of them latch onto its shoulder, teeth sinking deep into muscle. The behemoth bellowed in pain, thrashing as it tried to shake the creature off, but the Ravager clung on with vicious determination. Jax's eyes narrowed. Not today. He grabbed a jagged rock from the ground and sprinted toward the grappling pair. With all his strength, he leaped onto the Ravager's back, smashing the rock into its skull again and again. The creature yelped, trying to dislodge him, but he held on, driving the rock into its head until it went limp. The behemoth shook itself free, roaring with renewed fury. It turned on the remaining ravagers with a savage determination, tearing into them with a brutality that left no doubt why it ruled these lands. Claws ripped through flesh, teeth shattered bone, and within minutes the battle was over. The ground was littered with the torn remains of the ravagers, their bodies twisted and broken. The air was thick with the stench of blood and death, but the night was silent once more, save for the heavy breathing of the behemoth. Jack stood, bloodied and bruised, his chest heaving as he surveyed the carnage. He looked at the behemoth, and it looked back at him with something new in its eyes' respect. Jax had proven himself, not as a rival, but as a partner. "We make a good team, don't we?" Jax said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. The behemoth rumbled in response, a sound that Jax had come to recognize as approval. It stepped closer, towering over him, and then did something that took Jax completely by surprise. It lowered its head and nudged his shoulder gently, almost like a gesture of kinship. Jax chuckled, a weary smile creeping onto his face. "All right, big guy, I guess we're in this together." Word of the battle spread quickly. The wildlands whispered of it, and the creatures that dwelled in the shadows learned that the behemoth was no longer alone. It had an ally, a human who walked beside it, fought beside it, and understood it in a way that no one else ever had. In the days that followed, Jax and the behemoth roamed further than they ever had before. They ventured into valleys hidden deep within the mountains, places where even the most dangerous predators feared to tread. Jax learned more about the behemoth's ways, observing how it interacted with the environment, how it maintained a delicate balance in its domain. But Jax knew the real test was still ahead. He had seen the sign scars on ancient trees, unnatural disturbances in the wilds. Something was coming, something that threatened not just the behemoth's rule, but the very survival of the wild,